everybody, my name's Player Negative, and today we got something special for you guys. For I present to you all my first iceberg video. Now, most iceberg videos are very complicated and involve all this stuff, but I decided to narrow it down to 4 simple things in each video game category, starting from the tip of the iceberg from the lowest. So without further ado, let's get into it. First, we have layer 1. Let's start off with these. These are more of the random or more out there ideas, but have a good amount of fact to them. Starting off with Bomberman being an overpowered character. Now at first that might seem like a stretch to you. How is the guy whose only ability is making pyrotechnics so threatening? Well, you see, in this anime, it actually bothers to explain how Bomberman is able to conjure up an endless supply of explosives despite never carrying them on hand. We learn in the anime that a Bomberman's ability to create bombs is actually due to a power within inside their heart and pure will, not some random magic or something else entirely. And it's shown that they can create something other than bombs, they just choose to make it. If you want an example, here's one right now. See, he immediately conjured that from nothing but pure will of his own heart. So you're probably sitting there and asking the question, what's so overpowered about this? So what? He can make things just by focusing really hard on it. Well, that's where the problem sets in. You see, unlike a Green Lantern ring, which can only create a construct of the object, or Firestorm, which needs to manipulate molecules to rebuild or create an object, Bomberman can just summon whatever he wants. Now granted, this skill in the anime is shown that it needs to be trained and honed, but it's essentially something that every Bomberman has. All it needs is that they need the knowledge of the thing and the will within their heart to create said thing. Now, I want you to think about that for a second, because that means if they simply knew about any overpowered weapon you could think of, from sheer will alone, they could create that. Like, you all remember this joke right here? This powerful gauntlet that was a mix of all the random stuff in fiction? He could probably make this real if he wanted to. Like, yeah, he sticks to bombs because that's the only thing he knows how to make, or it's just something all Bombermen know how to make from default. But just think about that for a second. His ability isn't just to spawn bombs randomly, it's to conjure them out of sheer will alone. If he was strong enough, he could literally create any weapon he wants. Or better yet, another idea, he can make anything an explosive bomb he can trigger on his own merits. And that's without including the power-ups in the Bomberman games that allow you to enhance your bomb's range of fire, the amount of times you can make one per round, and whether or not you can detonate them or increase their size. So imagine what he could do if he was able to create literally any object in fiction imaginable. All of a sudden, this short little Konami mascot goes from cute to killer. So next time you're playing Bomberman, I want you to think about that. Think about how much power that little pipsqueak is holding. Next up on layer 1 is the Sushi Striker famine theory. Allow me to explain. Now, long-standing members of my channel probably remember me talking about this game back in the day when I first started this channel. And this game, if you've played it, which by the way, you should definitely do it, it's a really good game, exists in a world where sushi is practically illegal. Now, to Japan, that's nothing new. The reason I say that is because in the real world, there was a period of time where ramen was illegal, which you should definitely watch Goomba Gaiden because he did a whole video on that. I'll leave his link down in the description later. But the difference between Sushi Striker and that event in actual Japanese history is that, there aren't any other forms of food for people to eat without starving to death. What do I mean by that? Well, you see, in this universe, sushi did exist the normal way as it does in our world. However, over time, people polluted the waters and they all died out. Due to some form of divine miracle or something else, they were reincarnated as sushi sprites, which are basically this world's equivalent to Pokemon, except 10 times better. Basically, whatever fish they represented would produce that type of sushi, and they formed bonds with humans to specifically protect the world from starving to death. Now you might be asking yourself, how is that a problem? That doesn't sound so bad. Well, it's not a problem until you consider what counts as sushi in this universe. When you go to the catalog, you can actually check real-world different types of sushi. And at first, it's what you normally would expect, while also having a description of what this food is and how it operates. But then things get really weird when you find strawberries. Note the game labels this as sushi. Now, you could probably chalk this up to some sort of language error or something else entirely. But as you look further in the game, more things that don't technically count as sushi are on this menu, such as orange slices, edamame, sushi, pineapple, melon, kiwi, a literal chopped mango. Weirdly, in the opening of the game, which shows Musashi eventually grabbing a bunch of random fruits, he does it without any care, and he keeps on speaking as if no one's eaten at all in years. However, his Pokemon knockoff rival shows up named Kojiro and decides to start messing with him. After he eats the fruit and distaste of it, Musashi gives a random retort which oddly feels strange and out of place in this entire game. Just take a listen for a second, you'll see what I mean.
How can you stand to eat this? Are you kidding? Sure, it's nasty, but what else is there to eat besides this stuff?
That right there, that one line right there, completely caught my interest. You see, the thing about that line, that specific line right there, is that it tells us is that in this world, there's barely anything other to eat besides sushi. Now, it might sound stupid, because if this was our world and that band existed, that wouldn't really matter or affect us because there's other types of food to eat. But since normal things like strawberries and other forms of fruits and vegetables count as sushi in this universe, it makes me believe that they polluted a lot more than the water in this game. They might have accidentally polluted a lot of the resources within this universe that produce normal forms of produce. And that those that didn't wither away and get polluted were permanently altered, having that bitter taste. Which is why Musashi knew the fruit would taste like garbage. This suddenly makes the game a whole lot more dark when you really think about it, because the Empire in this game essentially cut off humanity from a good chunk of their resources in terms of food supply. Which also makes you realize why there's not that many elderly people who exist in this universe. Notice how most of the people in this universe are either an adult, a young man, or a teenager. And a few kids along the way. But you rarely ever see a normal human being who is like in their 90s or 40s. The only elderly character we get to meet in the game is General Osprey. And he only allows people to eat sushi if they eat with wasabi. And since like normal fruits and vegetables count as wasabi, that's just some disgusting crap right there. Imagine having to eat an orange covered in wasabi. That is just evil in every sense of the way. And it also puts all those jokes about sushi being this big, important thing that a lot of people love to brush off as a laugh in a much more serious light, because most food people eat in that universe count as sushi, even though it's technically not. Which means this fight was a lot more serious because it was literally a war for half the world's food supply. But it's not that dire, which is why I put it on the surface level of the iceberg. So, without further ado, let's move on.
Next up on the list is Eggman is a feminist. Now, that might sound stupid, like I'm pulling some random nonsense and something that just sounds biased with politics, but this is actually something canon. If you don't believe me, read the Sonic Encyclopedia.
As his name implies, Dr. Eggman is shaped like an egg and has an unfeasible high IQ of 300. Eggman is a romanticist, a feminist, and is sadly a charm that is often difficult to spot, though his ambitious laughter of the world domination is Sonic always finding a way to stop him and his diabolical plots. But with all his arch nemesis, Eggman is now seen as more of a rival than a full-on threat. You know, this actually explains why Eggman has such a love and admiration for Sage, apart from his own narcissistic reasons. It was just something I wanted to point out. Just saying. Moving on is the last one, and this is just the surface level, so we're going to go deeper as this goes on. Next up, the last one of the tip of the iceberg is the Mushroom Kingdom prejudice theory. Allow me to explain. Apart from contrary belief, Bowser is actually a really good leader and treats all of his minions with respect. All of them choose to follow him willingly. And you may ask yourself, why on earth would I choose to work for someone like him? Because Princess Peach hates all of them just simply for existing. Most of the Mushroom Kingdom is comprised of only toads and a few humans. The reason for that is because she hates all of the Mario enemies just for simply existing, even before Bowser kidnapped her. Like, for example, note how there's a very lack of anything other than a toad or a human in the Mushroom Kingdom. Not to mention the fact that in other areas across the Mario series, you see Koopa Troopas and Goombas live with toads without any issue. A good example is Mario Kart 8's Toad Harbor, where if you watch the monorails in those games, you can see Toads and Koopas sitting next to each other without any problems whatsoever. Even the spin-off games like Mario and Sonic hammer this home, where if you zoom in real close on the bleachers, you can see Mario enemies and Sonic enemies perfectly okay with Toads. This makes absolutely no sense. If Koopa Troopas were naturally hostile and horrible, why would they live with the nation of the people who hurt them day in and day out? The answer is simple. They don't live in the Mushroom Kingdom or with Bowser, so they're not on everyone else's radar. Characters in the Mario Paper series literally show what I'm talking about, because most of them are the same races as the very enemies Mario fight, but they don't hold any ill will to. Which is saying a lot, considering Mario stomps on these people, kicks them around, and beats them up in very graphic and very detailed ways when you think about it from their perspective. So, the real answer is just, they don't live in the Mushroom Kingdom, so they're not considered enemies, and they don't work for Bowser, so they're not considered a threat. When in reality, Princess Peach just hates Koopas. It's simple as that. Doesn't matter the motive, she just hates them. Now we have Layer 2. These are the more slightly darker but more out there Nintendo theories that still have a good amount of fact written in them. So, for the first one, we're just going to get into something that a good majority of people know. The Majora's Mask grief theory. Now, the basic rundown of the theory is that Majora's Mask is actually Link going through the 5 stages of grief, mourning the loss of either himself or the death of Navi. Now, this theory is pretty old, and while it has been debunked before, I do think it still applies. Just not to Link. And it has to do with who's wearing the mask, and that, my belief, is purely that the one who's grieving here isn't Link, but rather Skull Kid. Now, for those of you who haven't played Majora's Mask in a while or don't know the plots, Majora's Mask is about Link after the events of Ocarina of Time, when he went back in time and became a kid, warned the king about Ganondorf, and stopped his reign before it even began. From there, Navi for some reason just disappears and he goes out looking for it. That's when he runs into Skull Kid, who takes the ocarina and puts on a strange relic called the Majora's Mask. Now, this is when I should probably explain what a Skull Kid actually is. Now, okay, in the Zelda universe, there's this one location called the Lost Woods, which I'm pretty sure a good majority of Zelda fans are familiar with that. Now, it is stated in other games like Ocarina of Time, Wind Waker, and various other games that if one were to die in those woods, that they would come back as either a re-dead, which is one of those skeleton enemies with swords if it's an adult, but if you're a kid, you end up coming back to life as this thing. There was also a Zelda audiobook which state that some Skull Kids are actually Kokiri who had done misdeeds to the rest of the group. Now, my original theory is that he's mourning the loss of who he once was as a person. But then I found this. Now, to some people, this might look like Link, and granted, there's a lot of similarities. However, I think another idea is that this could be another Kokiri that he knew. Think about it. The sword that you find in Ocarina of Time is near the same entrance as the Lost Woods, a place where the Skull Kids reside. What if a Kokiri that the Skull Kid once knew, who traveled across Hyrule, was a close friend of his, but later on, he died, and the Majora's Mask created Termina, twisting the memories of the stories he heard of his friend's travels. And the Hyrule Historia literally backs me up on this, because if you actually look it up and read, it actually states that Termina is created from the twisted memories of the Skull Kid. Now, if these are real memories, they would be a lot more detailed and more one-to-one, but for some reason, certain details about Termina is more like a twisted version of Hyrule. If my theory was true, it would explain why things don't make sense. He only knows about places like the Gerudo Valley, the Zoran Field, and everything else from his friend, and those details are getting twisted by the mask exploiting his grief. Okay, next up is the Splatoon cannibalism theory. Okay, now this is gonna be annoying, but hear me out. So, this isn't even a theory, to be honest. This is actually something in the game. Like, I was bombarded with evidence to back this up, because for some reason, someone thought it would be really funny if we included a cannibalism joke in a Nintendo game. Because can someone please explain to me how the heck we had all of this? You mean to tell me this is not only something this universe is aware of, but something that's just culturally accepted? Like, what the heck? Nintendo had original concept art of this. There are literal lines of dialogue in the game talking about this. And now we got manga panels. And mind you, those mangas are suggested to kids, like, in their preteens. Who okayed this? Next up on Layer 2 is the Animal Crossing Tom Nook Island scam theory. So allow me to explain. So it's no secret to any Animal Crossing player that Tom Nook is a greedy jerk who just wants all the bells out of you to pay off a debt you never even asked for or paid for. So there's nothing new at first. But then you look a little bit deeper. You see, in this game, you're paid a very specific currency, bells. Now, players and a certain theorist you may all know actually figured out that bells are the equal currency as yen, Japanese yen to be exact. Now, why is this important? Well, apart from the fact that yen's value has shrunken down due to a certain someone in North Korea who shall not be named, another reason is because the game actually lets you choose what hemisphere you have your island set in, meaning you could have your island set in another country where the currency isn't worth diddly squat, yet it's all the economy runs on, it's all you're paid in, and it's all you're given. Not only does this mean you're being paid less for a lot of your work, considering in this country you may or may not be in, that currency isn't the standard for how much someone of your work should be paid, but also there's evidence to suggest that the island you resonate on might be unstable and will be destroyed at any point in time if you're not careful. Also, apart from that, Tom Nook is seen to have very aggressive behavior about whether or not you should have more bells being paid to him. He even gives you a contract, but you, as the player, never sign it. But it could be worse. He could be a lot like that other island man. Next up on Layer 2, the Sonic the Hedgehog extinction theory. Now, the running idea for this theory is that the fact is that there are very few hedgehogs in the entire Sonic universe. They never actually explain why this is, though. But my running theory is that they're either extinct or they were killed off as a double precaution to prevent people from creating another version of Shadow. I mean, to be fair, Gunn probably didn't want anyone committing the same experiments like Project Shadow, so getting rid of hedgehogs like Shadow would have been a smart choice. Another reason I say this is because Sonic's speed isn't something unique to only him. Yes, he's above average and he's considered the fastest thing alive, but most hedgehogs naturally have speed. This has been proven in the Sonic games later on down the line after Sonic R, specifically with Amy. In Sonic R, she had to rely on a simple vehicle like the little compacted Volkswagen Beetle she drove in Sonic R, but later games she was able to run and keep up with Sonic, which tells me that hedgehogs are able to just simply develop speed over time, which the fact is, if hedgehogs were extinct over time because of old age or because Gunn being Gunn didn't want people creating another being like Shadow, they simply just killed off all the hedgehogs, would make a lot more sense. It's just a random out there theory, and the shortest one I could possibly think of. Next up, we have Layer 3, and this is the more out there theories that have a lot of implications, but don't have a lot of evidence to back them up. Starting off with the first one, the Mega Man Lost in Space theory. The theory has to do with the events of the game Mega Man 2 for the Game Boy, or as it's known in Japan, Rockman World, which was a separate series from the mainline console Mega Man games. Anyways, okay, the basic rundown is that in this game, Dr. Wily steals a time machine to go several years in the future where Wily eventually retired and Mega Man did as well. The Wily of the past basically convinces his older self to go back to his villainous ways, kidnapping Mega Man and reprogramming him into a robot master called Quint. Eventually, you confront Quint in the game and beat him. However, he doesn't die or get repaired or destroyed, he just decides to disappear. Now, why does this matter? Well, you see, the future that version of Mega Man was pulled out of was one where the world was completely at peace and where Rock didn't need to be Mega Man anymore. This changes a lot because when you really think about it, this explains why no one ever mentions Mega Man's past deeds in something like the Mega Man X series, and why Mega Man is never around. He was ripped out of his own timeline and thrown into space. My firm belief is, after Mega Man was pulled out of his own timeline, later on, the future that Mega Man left behind becomes the future we see in the Mega Man X series. And if you're still not convinced, the Mega Man Anniversary Archie comic poster literally shows X being built on the same page that it shows Quint being created. Next up, we have the Mario Arms Dealer theory. Now, I'm sure a good majority of Mario fans are very familiar with Professor Alvin Gadd, or EGAD as he's known for short. Because despite this character only showing up in Luigi's Mansion during the time of the GameCube, he was actually responsible for the creations of both the villains and heroes' weapons within Super Mario Sunshine, which has called this character's moral ethics into question. Now, EGAD has done some good in the Mario universe by creating the Poltergusts assisting Luigi in his travels to defend ghosts from Mario's brother who have captured him and shoved him into a painting. However, as I've seen, it seems that EGAD is the one supplying Bowser with some of his weapons to help him combat Mario. Why do I say that? Well, one of his specific items that just came out recently in Luigi's Mansion showed up in a new form as a Mario enemy. I'm of course talking about is Gooigi. Now that might sound like a stretch, pun intended, but when you actually look into how this green copycat was made, there is an interesting premise of what it was later used for down the line. You see, as a promotion for the game, several bits of evidence on how Gooigi was created was shown to the public, and one thing that really got me interested in particular was this one picture right here. Now, if you look at the photo on the left, you notice that this thing was created using Luigi's DNA. But what's really interesting is the object on top of the monitor. You see that little camera over there with a flashing light? Many players from Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon may remember that as the fast travel way of how Luigi was able to teleport over the map. So this means while EGAD was sending Luigi over to fight King Boo, he was copying his DNA for this very purpose. Why? Well, what if I told you that there was a second, more refined version of Gooigi that later on became a Mario enemy you would meet in another additional game? And that enemy is this black-looking Luigi clone. In Super Mario Bros. Bowser's Fury, you run into this character for no reason whatsoever, and you defeat to get one cat shine. But its appearance and how it has this fluid-like texture reminds me of Gooigi so much. And then it got me thinking, what if EGAD sold this to Bowser for some nefarious purpose? Now the question is, why Luigi? Well, I think I have one pretty good answer, because Luigi was able to defeat the one Mario enemy that Mario himself could not, King Boo. And if you don't believe me, Gooigi was literally trained on Luigi's skill set from his previous adventures. If you read this picture right now, it literally says it learned to mimic Luigi's movement by watching videos. EGAD was specifically training this copy of Luigi to act and fight exactly like him. So, the question remains, if he could make one, why couldn't he build another? My personal theory is that the black Luigi you fight in Bowser's Fury is actually a prototype or some newer form of Gooigi EGAD was attempting to create and sold off to Bowser to further fund his research. And that's without mentioning the fact he created two specific items for some of the bad guys in Mario Party 7. Now, welcome to Layer 4, where the random and absurd dark things about Nintendo games are revealed. Starting up, we have the Splatoon Octo expansion. Alright, we're jumping right back into the world of Splatoon, and this is where I gotta talk about something that might be considered a little bit dark, so viewer discretion is advised. So basically, the next thing in Splatoon is talking about the Octo expansion, an extended DLC pack that allowed players to have a separate campaign mode that was loosely connected to the second game's campaign. Now, the thing about this is the main villain in this game, whose name is, I kid you not, Captain freaking Tartar Sauce, which is the dumbest name I have ever heard for a Nintendo character. That's saying a lot when you have a guy named Gino. Anyways, he has done what I could only consider the Nintendo equivalent of a massacre towards thousands of lives. And today, I'm going to explain what I mean by that. Now, the main campaign is pretty bare bones basic, but I'll just get into the skinny of it. You play as Agent 8. You are a Octoling trapped under the deep sea metro trying to make it out to the surface. Your main goal is to complete multiple tasks that are assigned to you, guided by a sentient payphone. Like I said, Nintendo is weird. What were you expecting? Now, at first, this just seems like a harmless campaign mode for the hardcore players who just want to enjoy it. But as you go deeper and deeper into the subspace metro, you uncover darker and darker secrets about this entire area. And this is where I gotta start going into the deeper lore surrounding the payphone I mentioned earlier. Alright, giving you a basic rundown of Splatoon lore. Tartar Sauce was an AI created by the last living human scientist on Earth who died, and basically stored every form of human knowledge and understanding of. Basically, this telephone's main goal was to wait for intelligent life to exist, and basically act as a guide, or as a cautionary warning not to commit the same mistakes that they did. Now, granted, a life did eventually show up, but for some reason, he didn't immediately engage when he was supposed to. And when the war broke out, the Great Turf War to be exact, he basically decided that they were unworthy because of his narrow way of thinking, like most AIs do, and decided the only way for there to be an intelligent life in a peaceful world would be to remove free will by creating a completely new separate life by, how do I phrase this in a way that's not going to sound messed up? Shoving those who failed and or passed his test into a ninja blender, killing them alive, and harvesting their remains to create a sort of cordyceps-like ink called sanitized ink to mind control those who he deemed worthy of his vision of a new world. Like I said, this got dark. But hey, that's Splatoon for you. Along the way, you also managed to free some of the Octarians who were held captive and were basically brainwashed by Captain Tartarsauce using the sludge. Basically, it's similar to how the Winter Soldier in Captain America was mind-controlled. That's pretty much all I gotta say. Next up is the Breath of the Wild Divine Beast Blight Ganon fights. Alright, so let me make this quick for you as possible. The basic running idea, you see, in the world of Breath of the Wild, in this version of Hyrule, Ganondorf came back, but due to the little information and understanding most of the people of Hyrule had in this universe, they somewhat stumbled upon Divine Beast. What are essentially giant, powerful, mechs designed to help combat Ganondorf. Now, each of them had a pilot for them in mind, which was the 4 champions, which were close friends of Link. Now, around this time, when the Calamity finally attacked, it somehow figured out a way to hack into Guardian technology, which is why every Guardian in the game is hostile towards you. But, there's one little minor thing that brings a lot into question. You see, the Guardians and other machines were easily able to be taken over because they were built on, like, programming or a form of AI. However, the Divine Beast required a pilot to control them. And that's where this theory runs. You see, the running idea is that due to the fact that each Blight Ganon you fight in the game has a very similar moveset and a very similar prowess to each champion's abilities and understanding of their skills, the running idea is that Ganondorf used his malice to merge machinery with a dead corpse of each champion. Why do we say this? Well, Breath of the Wild had a bunch of elemental weapons and items, and they mainly fell into 3 categories: lightning, fire, and water. If Ganondorf wanted to kill them off one by one, why would he use Blight Ganons with the same exact powers that they have? Wouldn't it make more sense to use what each of them are weak to? I'm just saying, when you think about it, it really seems to have a lot of holes in the argument that they were just killed by them. Next up, we have the Mario immortality theory. Basically, this idea comes from the fact that this picture, which was in a official Nintendo promotional manga for Mario 64 in Japan, shows a dead Mario corpse with a 1-up sprouting out the back of it. The running idea is that every time Mario dies after he touches a checkpoint, a part of himself, or a corpse, or literally anything else that was a remnant of him, turns into a mushroom for him to consume. So basically, every time he dies, he's regaining a piece of himself. I mean, can you even call this a theory if Nintendo literally gave an official piece of artwork for this? If you can, you can. If you can't, you can't. That's all I gotta say. I mean, there have been debates about this for a while, but overall, I think it's just an interesting idea. Well, that's all I got for you today. I'm Player Negative, and I'm signing off.